Welcome back to Smith History, separating the Smith from the myth. My name is Brian Smith, and today I take you back 57 years to a year etched so deeply in my memory that I can still feel it and hear it like it happened yesterday. The year was 1968. I was just 10 years old. I was a fifth grader at South School in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. Quaint little town in northern Ohio. We lived on Hick Street, right by the railroad tracks. Funny thing is, I don't remember much about the house itself, maybe a few corners, a few shadows, but I remember everything about what happened around the house. 1968 felt like life itself was on fast forward. Every month seemed to bring something new, something historic, something that made me look around and wonder, what's happening to the world I live in? And through it all, I was just a 10-year-old boy, half in childhood, half on the edge of growing up, trying to figure out what it all meant. Even now, 57 years later, 1968 stands like a monument in my memory, like it's cast in concrete and lit up in neon. I was a fifth grader at South School in Upper, as we called it. I can still hear the rumble of those trains as they went by our house. But what I truly remember is the world inside me and the world spinning wildly outside our little Ohio town. 1968 wasn't just another year, it was the year. The year of heroes, heartbreak, assassinations, and championships. It was the year when America seemed to teeter between hope and despair. And I, just a kid with big ears and bigger dreams, was caught in the middle, trying to make sense of it all. The year kicked off with Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers winning yet another Super Bowl. They beat the Raiders 33-14, and Lombardi walked off the field with his legend carved in stone. Lombardi was one of my early heroes. Tough, uncompromising. The kind of guy who seemed to chew nails for breakfast and made his players do the same. He believed winning wasn't everything, it was the only thing. I admired him so much that one day, I remember this very well, my mom got on me for misbehaving. And I tried to insult her by calling her Lombardi. She didn't take it as an insult. She smiled and took it as a compliment. It was like I said she'd been named Mother of the Year. Later she retold the story and said, "Brian gave me a compliment comparing me to Vince Lombardi." My mother was 32 in 1968. My dad was 35. Both younger than my three sons are now. That fact alone reminds me of how time plays tricks on us. Just days later, in 1968, University of Houston's Elvin Hayes stunned the mighty UCLA Bruins, beating Lou Alcindor, later Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, in one of the greatest college games ever played. It was called the Game of the Century. And I remember there was a young announcer named Dick Enberg, his voice already smooth as butter, calling the action. Of course, UCLA and Lou Alcindor went on to win another championship. But when it comes to college basketball, there was one guy, Pete Maravich, Pistol Pete. My brother Jeff and I looked up to him in many ways. That mop of hair, the floppy socks, the flashy behind-the-back passes. Pistol Pete wasn't just a basketball player. He was a magician, a rock star in short shorts. Every time Jeff and I shot baskets at the South School basketball court, we weren't just shooting hoops. We were Pistol Pete, showing the world how it was done. But as thrilling as sports were in 1968, the news was darker. I remember being at my Grandpa Butterman's house in Marion, Ohio. The Marion Star every day had a headline about the Vietnam War. It loomed over everything, and it was every night on Walter Cronkite. Body counts flashed across the screen like baseball scores. Young men just a few years older than my cousins were being drafted, sent overseas, and too many never came home. President at that time was Lyndon Johnson. He seemed worn down and battered by the war and the protests, and he shocked the nation by announcing he wouldn't run for re-election. I remember in that chaos out stepped Robert Kennedy, younger brother of the slain president, carrying the hopes of a fractured country. For a moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, America might find a way forward. February brought the Winter Olympics, and it lit up our black and white TV. I distinctly remember the name Jean-Claude Killet, the French skier with the speed of a rocket and the cool of James Bond, sweeping all of the alpine events. I love watching ABC Sports. It made me feel like the world was at my fingertips, even from Upper Sandusky. And that great ABC crew led by Jim McKay, his voice was smooth, almost fatherly. The world seemed vast, but strangely close, brought into our living room through those snowy scenes and the rabbit ears on our TV. Then April came, and with it shattering the innocence of my small town. Dr. Martin Luther King, assassinated in Memphis. I was only 10, but even in our small Ohio town, the news spread like a storm cloud. My little world was a place of school playgrounds, baseball gloves, and bubble gum. Suddenly, it collided with hate and violence. And then, just weeks later, Robert Kennedy was killed too. I recall that funeral train carrying his body as it passed through the nation, a rolling river of grief. And at 10 years old, I just couldn't understand why tragedy seemed to stalk the Kennedys, or why leaders who preached hope were silenced by bullets. My young mind was learning that the world could be cruel, unfair in so many ways. And I started to realize words do matter. But life went on, as it does. In the spring, at South School, I was running track in 1968 and winning my first blue ribbons, ribbons I still have today. Proof that winning is indeed a habit. At the same time, I was falling in love with the Detroit Tigers. Denny McClain was mowing down hitters on his way to 31 wins. I turned to Detroit because my Cleveland Indians remained the American League's doormat. Jeff and I listened to games on the radio as we walked around town or as we played hoops at South School basketball court. We lived and died often on every pitch. I still remember a time 57 years ago listening to the radio when the lineup was announced and one of our school buddies asked, "Where's Duke Sims?" Jeff, only 8.5, deadpanned, "He's in the dugout." That joke landed then, and it's still funny 57 years later. Proof that even small jokes can echo for a half a century. For me, in the summer of 1968, Little League was redemption. After being rejected the year before, crying all the way home from Harrison Smith Park, I finally got picked by the Elks. I wore that heavy wool uniform like it was the Yankee pinstripes. My dad, always supportive, was umpiring games so he could be close to us. My brother Jeff, too young for Little League, he tagged along every game. He would even play catch with me and field in the infield until the game started. And what separates the Smith from the myth was early in the season, a spot opened up. One of our players quit the team. Jeff became a member of the team. No one checked his age, and Jeff wasn't about to volunteer the truth. One of the few players in American history who played 5 years of Little League. And we won the championship that year. My first taste of glory. My first reminder that rejection wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. But not everything was glory. That summer, my mom had me set up to go away to camp for a week. But to me, it wasn't camp. It was exile. Maybe punishment for eating too much, for being too big, too loud, too me. I begged to stay home, but off I went, shoved in the back of a station wagon for the 2-hour ride to my fate. I remember that camp like it was yesterday. The first night, we slept out under the stars. That purple-black sky was clear all night. I still have a beautiful memory of that night. It was a clear, warm August sky. But when I saw a shooting star, I panicked. I remembered that my dad had once said, "If you see a falling star, someone close to you will die." Well, that was my dad's style, dropping bombs of doom where hope should have been. And as a 10-year-old, anxiety clutched me as I wondered who would be taken from me. Later during the camp, there was a water wrestling competition where campers were placed on top of other people's shoulders. And of course, some boy was placed on top of mine in the water, and he became too heavy, and down I went, underwater, gasping, fighting. Where was the lifeguard? I don't know. He wasn't watching. I literally thought I was going to drown. And I couldn't swim at the time. And that fear stayed with me a long time. There were some other moments that I'll never forget. It was a week of listening to Beatles songs on the radio. My very first race, a mile run that I had lost at the finish line. I was so upset because he was a teenager and I was only 10. And then as we were ready to leave, ready to get into our station wagon for the 2-hour drive home, the counselors stopped and said, "There's been a robbery. Someone has stolen a pair of cowboy boots and we need to check everyone's bags." Everyone, of course, denied it. But during the suitcase search, the stolen cowboy boots turned up in my classmate's suitcase. He was found out, but nothing came of it. He sat silent the whole 2-hour ride home. His name is lost to history now. I can't remember him, but I wonder if it turned his life around, or did he have a life of crime after that? I do know that that moment is etched in time and in my mind. When I finally made it home, I pleaded with my mother, never again. Never send me away again. Never do that to me again. And to this day, I can still feel the sting of rejection, the sense of being sent away. It was my first real taste of abandonment. But I also still remember the good moments from that camp, a starry sky. One of the few nights of my life that still lives in vivid color. By September, we were back at South School. Autumn belonged to the Tigers. Denny McLain won 31 games, a number no pitcher has reached since. The Tigers faced the mighty St. Louis Cardinals in the World Series. Bob Gibson was a one-man wrecking crew in 1968. But somehow the Tigers clawed back from 3-1 down to win it all. I had memorized that lineup: Kayleigh, Cash, Horton, Freehand, Mickey Lolich. It was a team that turned boys into fans for life. My Detroit Tigers had completed their miracle run. Tigers were more than players. They were heroes. And little did I know that I would meet some of them 3 years later. Now, Halloween should have been sweet that year, but instead, our mother cut it short. She went back to her old neighborhood in Marion, and we hadn't been out more than a few moments. We'd been out trick-or-treating just a couple houses when she found a crying boy lost on the street. Instead of trick-or-treating, Mom marched us to the nearby police station. But instead of leaving him there, she stayed the entire evening. I don't even remember how the situation ended, but I know our Halloween had ended after 5 minutes. My brothers and I never knew what became of that boy, but it showed who our mom was. She was Lombardi on discipline, and Mother Teresa when it came to compassion. Meanwhile, in Mexico City, the Summer Olympics were underway. They took place in October of 1968. Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fists in a silent protest for civil rights on the medal stand. Another moment that burned itself into history. Bob Beamon shattered the long jump record so completely it seemed like he'd flown. The games were glory and controversy, joy and protest, a mirror of the year itself. But the real story was politics had entered the Olympics. Even as a kid, I knew something important was happening. Sports were no longer just games. They were statements. As we got to December, it was unforgettable. Elvis Presley's comeback special showed the king was still the king. In our house, on a black and white TV, he lit the screen up in Technicolor. And I remember distinctly Christmas Eve, Apollo 8 orbiting the moon. The astronauts actually read from the book of Genesis. Their voices beamed down from space. In a year of violence and tragedy, it was a moment of peace, a reminder that God's word stretched beyond Earth itself. A nation torn apart by violence and war paused just for the moment. At home, we still had a black and white TV in 1968, and in many ways, my life was still black and white too. But the world was moving toward color broadcasts. My mind was also expanding, growing sharper and more vivid. 1968, for me, was a year of winning and losing, of laughter and tears, of baseball bats and funeral trains, of Lombardi toughness and falling star fears. I was only 10 in 1968, but I was growing, taller, hungrier, more determined. The lessons of that year, the ribbons, the rejections, the triumphs, and the traumas, built the foundation of who I'd become. Looking back, I realized I was blessed. Blessed with classic cars, classic sports, music that still sings in my ears, and memories etched so deeply they've outlasted time. I may not remember the wallpaper of that house on Hicks Street, but I remember what mattered, the life lived inside it. And that, my friends, is what separates the Smith from the myth. My name is Brian Smith, and we are history. Thank you for listening.